Hey guys, welcome back. Today I wanted to dive into the question of how important is your schedule during pre-construction. Now, a lot of you that are estimators or that have built estimates in the past, maybe you've worked on the pre-con side of construction, you may realize that it's not really common for small projects, at least, to build an entire schedule during the pre-construction process. Usually, it's a little bit closer to when buyout happens. Um, but there is an importance of building at least a preliminary schedule of the project when you're bidding it out, even if it's a small one. So for our purposes here, we've got an example. Let's say that you're an estimator for a general contractor. You've been reached out to about building a small warehouse for construction to begin July 21st, 2025. You reach out to two prime contractors, for two prime contracts, one for earthwork and one for the building component. Um, you select probable contractors for each of those scopes, and you're good to go. And next, you're putting together your GCs and GRs. If you've seen my previous videos, we've talked about the process of kind of what that looks like. And GC labor and general requirements are usually dependent on the duration of the project. And so you just want to make sure that you're covered. And so you think that it's going to take 9 weeks. You reach out to your boss. He or she thinks it'll take 9 weeks. That makes sense. And then you reach out to the probable building contractor and you ask them, how long would it take to build this building? And they say, probably around 9 weeks. Perfect. You're good to go. Well, there is a little problem with that. We've got a preliminary schedule here. So in the example I just gave, there was a minor but really important miscommunication. We asked the building contractor, how long would it take to build this building, not how long would it take to build this project? And so we've allocated 9 weeks. So July 21st, or the week of July 21st to the week of September 15th. When we asked the building contractor that, they assumed that we were talking about their scope only. Um, Obviously, we need a little bit of time for earthwork to happen, especially mass excavation, at the very least, to happen before the building contractor can arrive on site. And so let's say that we've selected a really efficient earthwork contractor. They can get the mass excavation done in 3 weeks. It's not a huge project, and so it's doable. And then they need an additional 2 weeks after concrete starts here on the week of August 11th. That's when your building contractor would come in and start pouring foundations. They need an additional 2 weeks with overlap to our building contractor to finalize grading, um, maybe export stockpiled materials, remove SWIP, whatever it is. And then your building contractor comes in on week 4 to start construction on the week of August 11th. Well, that creates a little bit of a challenge because that adds 3 weeks of our scope that we didn't account for. And so this is an example I've used already, but let's go here. So we've got this box right here. And so our estimated cost, we're going to equal sum. And for those of you that may not be familiar with what this is just a really basic general requirements spreadsheet. The earthwork and building contractors, you wouldn't normally build into this. This is just to kind of show a schedule against our labor. And so they're on site, they're billing for 40 hours a week. If it's a kind of a turnkey thing where they have their own equipment and labor, they may charge a little bit more per hour if we make them do overtime. But they've agreed to our contract, which says that their price includes just normal time construction. And so 40 hours a week for each of these guys. On our labor, we have a project manager who starts off 20 hours a week during earthwork. And really, that's just the first 3 weeks of the project. That's when we think concrete is going down. And then maybe he's getting off another project, and then he goes 40 hours a week for the rest of the project up until what we think the rest of the project is up until the week of September 15th. And then we have a part-time superintendent, 25 hours a week, and then a full-time project engineer, 40 hours a week. They're going to be on site the entire time. They're going to kind of be the point of contact for our earthwork and building contractors. And then if there's any problems, they can relay it up to the superintendent or the project manager. So this is a little bit of a problem because we've only allowed for labor up until the week of September 15th. And so that'll actually go to that Friday before September 22nd. So we have 3 weeks of labor that we haven't accounted for And quite possibly, we won't realize the mistake we've made until after we've gone to contract. Um, some owners out there are pretty cool, they're pretty forgiving. At the end of the day, this is business. And so if we've made the mistake and this is risk that we haven't accounted for, we may be liable for the additional time it takes to actually build this project. And so if we look at the actual cost of construction, so there's still a formula there. So let's control copy Alt H V V. Now it's just a value. So $104,000. The actual cost, we're going to go back, equals sum to our total cost of labor. And this is just cost per hour. This is burdened. So $150 an hour times the total hours here of construction. And so each of these cells represents hours per week worked for that person. But let's see. So now we're going to highlight the September 15th cell. We're going to press Shift and then arrow to the right a handful of times until we get to October 6th. Control R. That updates the amount of hours that we need to build the project, and then it updates the total cost. And now we have an actual cost of construction for managing the project, assuming there's no delays. And again, if that's written in our contract, if there's weather delays, we could potentially get a change order for that. But we're going to assume that there's no weather delays. The project runs perfectly on schedule according to how our subcontractors thought it would run. But we still went over on our labor. And so if we subtract 142,000 from 104,000, that gives us a delta of $38,800 that we would potentially be accountable for. And that's all based on a pretty simple communication, even though we did our due diligence. And so my suggestion, if you're an estimator, if you're getting into estimating, if you're new to this industry, my suggestion would be to build a really simple preliminary schedule, just essentially start and finish. And then as you're building your GCs and GRs, and so as you're factoring in labor, make sure to communicate with a few people. Even reach out to your subcontractors, ask them, when would you want to start? When could you start? When would you finish? What does your price include? And also, what activities need to be completed before you can start your work? And so if this was me, if I had asked the building contractor, how long will it take you to build this? The answer is 9 weeks. Okay. And what needs to happen before you can mobilize? Well, Mr. General Contractor, we actually need earthwork out of the way. We need mass excavation out of the way before we can start pouring concrete. Okay. I would go back to the earthwork contractor, ask them, and they would tell me, we can do this in 3 weeks. We'll contract to it, but we need 3 weeks. And that would have covered me on this $37,000 delta, which may not seem like a lot, but that's compared to $100,000, and so that's about a third of your labor is going to be marked as a loss, and that comes out of either your contingency or your fees. So really important. Again, just to recap, make sure that you're building a preliminary schedule, just something really basic to understand simple starts and stops to your project. And that's all I've got today. Thank you so much.